been practicing my Balkan dancing, but not my microphone technique. Okay, we begin straight away because it's, I hope, a meaty panel. And there's a huge a countdown going on, so we're heading to the moon. Fake Balkan musicians versus the Balkan brand. Everything in life is now a brand. We have seen Balkan music played by Western European bands where authentic, it's a very moot word, authentic voices, actual Balkan musicians could have been played. What prevents the region's musicians from entering a broader market, and what can the industry, that's us, do to grant them passage? A pro-Balkan, awareness raising and stereotype-smashing panel sets the tone of the conference. And I introduce the panelists, starting with Nicolas, my namesake, Nicolas Wieers, from Balkan Trafik. Balkan Trafik is an annual festival in Brussels, and Nicolas lives in Moldova, and is therefore bona fide Balkan, as am I, because I live in Istanbul. And it's, I think, probably the biggest festival of Balkan music in the world, let's say. Let's imagine.
Thank you. It's really too much, but...
And he's been doing it a long time. Then Mila Georgieva from So Alive Showcase Festival and the Bulgarian Music Association. So Alive will be in November, is it?
It's October.
October, yeah. Soon. And it's in Sofia. Bulgarian Music Association speaks for itself. And Dávid Bali, who is not from Bali, and he's representing Believe, which is one of the very big digital distributors. I think that's fair to say, and does other things, of course. Yes, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on our biographies. I'm from Istanbul. I have a promoting company, a talent buying, and an artist agency called Charmworks. And I am a musician and love music, strangely. I just want to, before diving into the central question of the panel, I think we have to have a sense of what we're talking about. So, what is Balkan music? Is it a style, a family of styles? Is it an ethos, a romantic fantasy? Is it simply music from the Balkans, however we may define what is included in that region or not? Is it music that has its roots in the traditional musics of the region? Noting the background music in my hotel's breakfast room this morning was Serbian turbo folk, which definitely has its roots in the traditional music of the region, but is probably not what any of us think that we are supposed to be doing. But it's in a way the most pan-Balkan music of them all. So another question would be, is Balkan music and music from the Balkans, are they two very different things? I don't want to discuss this because there's a panel later about this subject, so I don't want to steal from them. But to move on, just to leave those questions hanging a bit in the air, to move on to local traditions. Obviously, the Balkans is not a country, it's not a nation, it's a geographical mishmash of many countries, in fact, many languages, language groups, traditions, and so forth, occupying roughly the same geographical area. And there are distinct local traditions in the Balkans, very distinct ones, like, for example, which are not very well known in the wider world, like Rembetika or Sevda. So one question would be, should we be promoting those styles? Should we be making those styles better known in themselves? Or for another obvious example would be Bulgarian polyphony, which has to a big degree been popularized by Les Mystères des Voix Bulgares. And then there's the archetypal Roma, which is obviously another way of saying Roma is gypsy, but we say Roma, brass band music epitomized by the Guča Trumpet Festival in Serbia, and perhaps popularized by the classy kitsch of Kusturica's films and Goran Bregovic. A kitsch that is perhaps a little passé, in my opinion, but then being passé is part of the definition of kitsch, and perhaps Roma brass band music in its essence as wedding and circumcision music is kitsch, essentially, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. Just an aside is that none of these very local genres are particularly associated with dance styles, and maybe that's why they haven't swept the world. If you think about tango or flamenco or salsa, which are very associated with a particular dance. So maybe, question mark, we should be focusing more on Balkan dance than music. Do you want to comment so far? I'm bad.
I think that we forget a little bit of the Jewish music also. You talk about the Roma and everything, but also Jewish is part of the Balkan music, which for Goran Bregovic is one of the last real musical buzz in the Balkan. He said that for him, perhaps the next step will be to work more with klezmer band, and it's true that klezmer is important in the Balkan. That's all.
I just wanted to use those as examples, really, and because we talk about Balkan music as if it's a bit one thing, and it's obviously not one thing. That's clear, and then I think it's quite important to recognize that there are individual styles, many different styles, and some of them are unique to the Balkans. I think both Rembetika and Sevda are unique, whereas klezmer is not unique to the Balkans, although of course it might have its, that's another question, musicological question. So it's more about the question is, should we be promoting the styles themselves and make them more appreciated internationally? Is that one way to answer the question of how do we better export or better diffuse Balkan music?
Okay, I can jump up here. Even in our preparation conversations we had, it's which style to promote? Balkan style, Balkan genres? Because it's, I will stand from this, I think that I will contribute to this panel from the side of the person from the Balkans who is actually working for years in the field to popularize the Balkan music in different genres around the world, which is a challenge. And because of stereotypization from one side, and considering that, like, all the perception from outside the Balkans, that we have one common genre, like the brass band music. The brass band music, actually, what is most famous around the world is the Serbian brass band music. It's not a Balkan music, it's Serbian music. The brass music from Bulgaria is totally different, from Romania is different. It's the same with the different styles. So honestly, like the Serbians has always been, and because of former Yugoslavia, very good in the marketing, and historically they haven't been behind the Iron Curtain, so they're pretty good and has historically represent their music a lot more than the rest of the region around the world. So the bigger part of the perception for Balkan genres is that they are common genres, but they are not for the whole region. And this stereotypization somehow is something that we partially struggle from, because all the development of this music and the perception of the world that the Balkan music is one style is actually an issue for us, for the artists that really would like to put themselves and improvise with all the richness of this traditional music, and of course combining it with everything they want in the contemporary styles or traditional styles, like global styles, not just local, authentic and traditional. And this is something which is, just want to make a point for this, as there is another issue when you come and try to reach the rest of the world, is that because the rest of the world understands that Balkan music is a genre, and we are here to talk about is it a genre or is it a music made on the Balkans from Balkan musicians, because Balkan musicians, not all of them, like everywhere around the world, are making traditional music or are dealing with traditional melodies and rhythms in their music. And what is probably the biggest challenge and the biggest thing that we need to make our breakthrough is to stop this stereotypization and our music that is coming from our countries to be perceived not only when it's dealing with traditional genres. But anyway, coming back to here, because here, and we are at the part of an event that is focused on world music, that of course is connected with all the authentic and traditional features within the music. Even though within this world music, I think that the Balkans are still not discovered well enough, exactly because what is most famous from the Balkans is actually Serbian music and music genres.
Can I interrupt you and ask you a
Yes,
question?
sure.
I get the point that, of course, there's a lot of music which is not rooted in tradition or not rooted in local traditions. Actually, all music is rooted in something, but it's not necessarily rooted in local traditions. So, for example, a techno DJ from Istanbul is making techno, which is global techno, and may have absolutely zero local content. From a point of view of an imagined Turkish export office, it's music. It's you know, it's something that the country should be exporting, and there would be nothing wrong in, let's say, with the Turkish Music Export Office exporting Turkish techno, let's imagine. So are you saying that from a Bulgarian point of view, that you also feel that we should be making a distinction between music which is traditionally rooted, which probably most of us have as a common love, and music which is not, but is commercial or internationally marketable?
Yes, indeed, and I think that what we need to open for, if we are representing, we are coming from another part of the world, is that we need to be able to accept that there is music made on this part of Europe that is not rooted in the traditional music, and it's not bad at all. We also have a very famous DJ, which is top 5 techno DJ from Bulgaria, but he actually doesn't have gigs in the region, almost no gigs. It's weird somehow. We have a lot of stories, but I don't want to dig so deep in it. Like when you make music which is not rooted in the traditional music, and when you go around and the feedback, I have had personally this feedback from a lot of promoters, agents from around the world. When I ask, okay, let me know what advice you would give to Bulgarian even jazz bands, or what they should do to just go through or to make their breakthrough on the international market. And they always say, your traditions, your rhythms, your melodies, but nothing else is accepted.
Can I just say that from my point of view, if you're making techno, just as an extreme example, you are operating in the global market, and actually the techno market is very open. Nobody really cares where the techno DJ is from. They can be from the Netherlands, or they can be from Korea. Nobody cares.
I would a bit argue with that.
Yeah, I'm just being provocative.
Yeah, no, but yeah.
But
I mean that.
For example, I give a very small personal example. I did some research a lot of research actually on Ukrainian artists, because we wanted to support Ukrainian artists, and that included Ukrainian techno. And there was Ukrainian techno released by British record companies. You couldn't tell it was Ukrainian. There was nothing Ukrainian about it. The name of the artist wasn't Ukrainian, the music wasn't Ukrainian, but it was Ukrainian. So I think that in the techno world, things are actually pretty open. And if you're a pop singer, Dua Lipa is the most obvious example, who sings in perfect English, then also you can, the world is your oyster. Nobody cares where Dua Lipa is from, or Rihanna is from Bermuda, or whatever it is. So this is in the commercial world, it's about you have to play the global commercial game, you have to find a way into the global market, and so on and so on. But for most musicians and musics from the Balkans, including the more exportable ones like Dubiosa, there's some level of rootedness in the local tradition where they come from. And that would seem to me a very good thing, because otherwise music gets boring and everything sounds the same.
Yeah, that's what I also wanted to add to your ideas, because my main concern is, and since we had our preparatory calls, I also dig into data. So I'm the one in this panel who will always come with the boring part. But on the other hand, I tried to dig into the fact that would it be possible at all by the key stores like Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and Tidal to let them accept Balkan music as a genre. But on the other hand, my main concern is that, theoretically speaking, what if then, let's say Tidal is quite proactive in the Balkans right now, they try to gather traction. What if they just create a Balkan music playlist? So basically they will provide an additional stereotype. So young musicians will have the image that, okay, I should write music this way to get participated in this particular playlist, which is totally against any artistic will or freedom. And on the other hand, I realized, and for example, there's the genre taken by Apple, Spotify, whatever, like Latin music, Indian music. And India is also quite diverse, so it's not something, but on the other hand, I can imagine that these stores are involved in the fact to basically maximize their consumption, meaning that more and more people should basically just subscribe to the services. And what if, in these terms, that right now, they are forcing musicians from the Balkan region to choose between folklore or world music / regional folk, which is also something that provides a mistaken stereotype, because it's not an N+1 alternation of an existing genre. Especially, as you also mentioned, that is deeply rooted in our past, our heritage, or basically what we've been through together. So in this occasion, I also try to come into this quite proactively, and I see that, for example, stores like Spotify, at least they show interest on this. But as you mentioned, the example for techno, right now, for example, if someone from Albania is trying to reach out to diaspora in Germany, they have to compete with German artists for the same placements. And it's also something that's regularly against the artistic will. And in this occasion, I think it's strictly just capitalizing tracks as assets instead of dig into the artistic will behind each expression. And I'm sure that Dubi was also suffering from that, because from time to time they also have to show that they are different from everyone, while on the other hand they're also a flagship of something bigger than themselves.
This was a point that Nicolas made in some of our email exchanges, where which I find is a very interesting argument. You know, Nicolas has got a big festival, he has to sell tickets, otherwise what's the point of having the festival? And therefore he has to reach a large audience. And he has a problem, which is you have to find a new headliner each year. You can't have the same headliners every year. But it's a festival called Balkan Trafik, so it has to be Balkan. It can't just put anything. So that's you know, the commercial issue of you want something that has a local identity, and at the same time you want something to be marketable, saleable, commercial, you know, etc. And I think, in a sense, life is easier in the very niche world, where you don't expect major success. I mean, you know,
in 20 years, when I started Balkan Trafik 20 years ago now, in 2003, then it will be the 17th edition next year, but the production started 20 years ago, and in 20 years, the European solstice changed completely the mentality of the people, the political situation, geopolitical situation, the mind of the new generation also. From a type of patriarchal society, now it's really a dynamic and positive and focused to the future world. And Balkan Trafik has to follow that change. Then we were talking about stereotypes and everything. It's true that Balkan Trafik could seem something reducing the reality of artists from the Balkan. Okay, Balkan, it's a strange word, and sometimes I use European solstice, but anyway, we understand. And 20 years ago, it was the buzz with the Balkan music. It was the chantel, as Madame from the WOMEX said, the Taravdai, Dug Malarai Banda, chantel, Goran Bregovic, Kusturica, Amira it's new, but Esma Redzepova and all that type of huge stars. But after 1 year, it was already down. Then Balkan Trafik survived from 20 years, because we are following the reality of the ground, and on stage we have bands as Naked, for example, who are making fusion of style. They are using their tradition, and they have to be proud of that, and not obviously to feel it as reducing what they are doing, but they have to use their diversity. Because when you check the poster of all the festival around the world, it's always the same. It's only urban music, it's hip-hop, it's the same guy. We know it everywhere, it's the same guy, it's the same headliner. Then we have to be proud you have to be proud. Well, I'm Belgian, you know, then, but I live also in the Balkan, I spend my time in the Balkan. We have to be proud about this patrimony. And we have to do everything to keep alive and to fight on a way, as Dubiosa perhaps is doing, to fight against the uniformization of the culture. Then sometimes I feel on a very dangerous side with my festival. Because on a way I have to avoid the polemics, I have to avoid to stay like the idea of tradition, of Roma community, and I have to show the new generation of the Balkan musician. And it's really not obvious, because I'm a festival, which means that I'm not a cultural center. Cultural center with 500 seats, for example. Festival means that we'll have to pay the fence, we'll have to pay the stages, we'll have to pay the technicians, the insurance and everything to start from scratch and to build a festival during 3 days. It means that I have to find money somewhere. And with a beautiful band from the Balkan, I could perhaps get 200 people on my venue, you know? But for a festival, I have to get minimum 4 Balkan Trafik, which is a really little festival. I have to get at least 3,000 festival goers per day, paying their tickets, plus subsidize and everything, and then I can manage the festival. Where, with the new generation of the Balkan, can I find, apart Dubiosa Collective, as always, or they are great. They came last year again.
Nicolas, what your 3,000 punters who buy tickets,
per day,
what are they looking for when they come to a festival called Balkan Trafik?
Yeah.
What do they want?
But that's an interesting question, because Brussels. The festival takes place in Brussels, and Paris already 3 edition, but mainly in Brussels for 70 edition. And Brussels is really multicultural city. It's full of diaspora. The second largest diaspora in Brussels is Romanian diaspora. Then there is connection with it's not like, I don't know, perhaps, I don't know the social reality in Budapest, but Brussels, there is a lot of, there is African side, there is Moroccan side, there is Bulgarian side, there is Turkish side. Then when there is obviously all the expat from the NATO, from the EU, people who are interesting about also the Balkan music on a way. And there is the Belgian.
But what are they looking for?
I think that they are looking to discover, to stay linked with something different than the normality. Obviously the craziness of the Balkan, because it works very well, craziness of the Balkan. You said when you start about the romantic side of the Balkan, why not? But a few of them are also just looking for hip-hop or urban music also. And then I'm used to invite urban bands from the Balkan. For example, Subcarpați from Romania. They are very famous in Romania. They cost a lot. The fees of Subcarpați, there are 12, 13 on stage. It's very expensive. In Romania, they will fill a huge venue, like perhaps 5,000 people, but not in Brussels. But then, the people in Brussels, there is a diversity, and all that diversity is looking for something different. That's why I have to program also a diversity on stage. There will be jazz, there will be urban music, there will be tradition.
Because in this
there will be wine, there will be gastronomy, because...
Right, but you know, the Balkans is obviously very rich musically, and there are plenty of new artists every year, I assume. I don't speak about Turkey because that's a depressing case, but I think that generally speaking there are new artists in the Balkans appearing. But you can't just program those because they don't sell enough tickets. So there's a kind of contradiction in what you're saying. On the one hand, your audience is people who are looking for something different, something new, and on the other hand, they want to see something they know.
No, it means that I have to find at least one headliner per day. And the other band could be this quality band from the Balkan.
Right.
Then people will pay, because it works like that, people will pay for the headliner, and then they will discover the other part of the lineup.
And so the question then is, and it's an interesting question, I think, do you think that something has changed in the Balkans over the last 20 years, which means that there's a reason why maybe there are fewer headliners than there were 20 years ago?
Obviously, everything changed.
Okay, but what?
Because, I mean, there is the Kusturica film, movies. There is the Goran Bregovic soundtrack. It was like something exotic. People were looking for something exotic 20 years ago.
And let's remember the Bulgarian polyphony. That's also very important because it's the Bulgarian polyphony, the Les Mystères des Voix Bulgares, was totally separate from Kusturica and Bregovic, but happened around the same time, or even a bit earlier, actually.
The Bulgarian, Les Voix Bulgares, the Bulgarian voice?
Yeah.
But it was linked with Bregovic also. Huh? They were, even more, they were discovered by a French sound engineer. It's also the Hazard, which, no, I don't know, because you are specialized also on the...
Bregovic had nothing to do with the Bulgarian voices, but he used them later, of course. That's different. But the actual phenomenon of the Bulgarian voices was nothing to do with Kusturica or Bregovic. It was a separate event, culturally. And it was the initiative of I think there was a French producer and then 4AD Records and all the rest of it. It doesn't matter. But the only point I'm making is that it's not, it would be, we have to be careful, I think, of giving too much power to Kusturica and Bregovic. And also, it's over. That's the past. So where's the present?
No, but I mean, that's the topic here. Fake Balkan musician against the Balkan brand. I mean, when I have to count the number of stars of the Balkan, they are not from the Balkan. I mean, you know, Chantel, not from the Balkan. Gogol Bordello, not from the Balkan. Bregovic, he spent his life in France.
I got an example for you. So this is interesting. Who is the biggest selling Turkish band in the world? Altın Gün. Where are they from? They're from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
They're not from Turkey. It's shocking, actually. It's completely shocking. There are great, or maybe there should be, or there are Turkish bands who are just as good as Altın Gün, and they are nowhere near as well known as Altın Gün. And anyway, sorry.
No, I was just exactly following this point, musicians against, Balkan music against Balkan musicians, or vice versa. And this is something that just observing with them, I'm really amazed from this. I have heard so many bands that say that they make Balkan music. They're not people from the Balkans, but they make Balkan music, which is totally different genre. Like the Balkan music made by people that are not from the Balkans. But it is like their perception, how they, it is amazing how they perceive this music. Of course, they make a fusion out of their personal perceptions, some rhythms that are weirdly executed.
You know, I'm British.
Yeah.
The British pop musicians, rock and roll musicians, made their whole world-changing careers out of copying Black American music. So there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't say it's wrong. It's just my observation, because with the years, and I see like festivals that are some kind for Balkan music and Western Europe, for example. It's not only Balkan Trafik. It's I've seen different branding when it comes to Balkan music, and you listen to some bands, and you can't believe it. Like coming from my, it's not bad. But it's weird for me, why is it called Balkan? And then I've been analyzing this, and I see that it's very interesting to see a perception of people who are quite from a distant place from the Balkan and how they actually perceive this music, and they really think they're making this music. I'm not talking about traditional music. I'm talking about a fusion that they call Balkan. It's like it can be Balkan punk or something like that. It's very, quite interesting for me.
Yeah, I have a bit funny addition to that. I think you all remember that about 2 or 3 years ago there were a handful of adaptations from Brepetrunko into hip-hop and trap music. And from case to case, it also had its time in Hungary, in Romania, and certain artists also tried to imitate the same vocal lines or even the same melody within the aggressive soundscape of trap. And whenever we said that, sorry, you can't claim it on YouTube because it's obviously not your content, they also refer to it, but it's folklore, it's also mine. So on the other hand, they also, they knew that they stole it in these terms for commercial success, basically using a pattern or a sampling for strictly commercial success, not because it gives anything to their heritage. But on the other hand, whenever it's coming to just straight face-off that you can't really do this because obviously it's something against the guidelines, something against monetization, then they will also use the same selling point that it's also part of mine. I just used to sing it when I was a child, and obviously you're not. You were born and raised in Budapest. You heard this song 2 months ago, so it's quite clean. So I totally get this, and there's this kind of Gen Z traction, I think, that especially whenever there's a new artist who's mostly aiming for commercial success, they boldly go into tradition and they want to use it instead of respecting it.
I think that, but you can't, well, we could go around in circles with that because you can't stop it. And you may like it or you may not like it, but it's part of the way the world works. Everybody listens to everything, everybody has access to all the global music in the world, blah, blah, blah. For example, I'm in Turkey, there's a huge Turkish rap scene, hip-hop scene. It's sung in Turkish, so it doesn't export, but it's very big in Turkey. And it's totally American music, except it's sung in Turkish. That's the only single thing that makes it different from what you might hear in the States or internationally. The fact it's sung in Turkish. And of course, that's the same in Hungary. It's the same in every country in the world. There's a local rap scene where the music is international, but the language is local.
But it's not about the language, but basically the melody line, like without using it, without respecting the tradition, and just only making it for the buzz. So when we talk about those drill communities, especially when there are former expats' childs and they identify themselves as Moroccan in Italy, obviously they want to rely on the heritage they bring by their family. But when it's strictly about that they heard a dope beat on YouTube and they just want to imitate it.
But it gets interesting. I mean, out of, for example, the Turkish rap scene, there are 1 or 2 Turkish rappers who do good music, in my biased opinion. And it's good because of their politics, because they have something to say. They're not just talking about the girls or the jewelry or the drugs. They're talking about Turkish politics, actual, real stuff. And then they get into trouble. One of the biggest ones has left Turkey because otherwise they'd be in prison. So that's, you know, there will always be artists who do something with the form. And one thing that they might do with the form is add local elements. So that the music is not just a copy of American hip-hop, for example, but also includes some darbuka or something that gives it color, local color. And the same applies to jazz. The same applies to rock music. Or it applies to every genre, every international genre. You can take it and you can make it, which is what the Brits did in the 60s with American rock and roll. They made it British. It's still rock and roll, but because it sounds British, then it started to have a life of its own. And Dubiosa do that. I mean, that's their quality, is that they are not just a copy of something else. They are magpies. Of course, Manu Chao, who's playing here, is a total magpie. It's not a criticism. That's how popular music works. But I think we should try to come back a little bit to this territory of Kusturica happened, Bregovic happened, the Bulgarian voices happened. It's all 20 or 30 years ago or more. Where are we now? You know, what is happening on the Balkan scene now? And is there a problem? Is there something not working properly? Is there something where we feel, or where you guys feel that the scene isn't producing the kind of new talent that really can change the
I think
European
that
stage.
there is a huge problematic that we cannot change. It's just the mind of the people, you know? It's like punk music. It was also a local band, finally, punk music. It was a great band, local band, but it was in Britain, you know? Then they get that sort of very important support, but you mean from scratch? They were from Britain, then they get the support from this huge musical industry from Britain. In Balkan, as we said, it's so diverse that I'm not sure that they have that type of support. You know, they have really to struggle. It's done. There is on my side, I think that we will have to pass through fusion. And then perhaps back on original Balkan music, I don't know, but at least fusion, like, I don't know, perhaps something linked with Manu Chao. Manu Chao could help to renew the wave of the Balkan. I'm talking about my festival. Or perhaps a fusion with, then for me, yes, fusion is the most important now. It's really to link huge European artists to a Balkan artist. I know that it could be problematic to speak about that, but it seems that for my festival, I'm now like on a, how do you say,
when you say fusion, do you mean, for example, a Balkan rock group or a Balkan pop group or a Balkan electronica project? Or what does fusion mean?
Fusion means Dubiosa Collective are doing it very well, for example. It's to add a new flavor to the tradition. It's to add a new rhythm, to go perhaps a little bit...
So does it mean taking a global international popular music style and adding some local element? Is that fusion?
Perhaps, yes. Perhaps. It's not easy. It's something complex. But no, I feel that we are really on a sort of U-turn road for a festival. I mean, not for cultural venue, but for a festival about Balkan.
Yes, as there are really many bands on the Balkan who are doing fusion, and most of you have never heard about. And I just want to say my point of view, as we have a lot of fusion bands. I personally don't think that even 50% of them are actually worth it and make something which has some bigger value. But we have a lot, we have enough. I mean, we have enough as a quantity and qualified, let's say, ones. But I will refer to something else because I don't think that the lack of fusion it's the issue. We have, like, again, speaking on my position geographically, where I'm positioned, we are dealing with a very big lack of motivation. Like all the issues on the Balkans, and I'm not talking about wars and stuff. We have political issues. We have, he's right that we don't have support. We don't have politics of culture export. Not only funding, we don't have strategy for that. Like our politicians and political situations don't have, political representative, they don't have capacity of thinking about it. For them, a cultural diplomacy or cultural export is something that sounds really good and they give €1 for that. Like, it's not something that they actually think about, and they don't see the industry in that, which is our very big issue in Bulgaria, but now we are trying to talk about business, not just spiritual growth, you know, it's business.
Can I just say that there's an interesting thing about cultural export offices, which have mushroomed. There are many more of them now than there were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And there are now some in Eastern Europe. There didn't used to be. In Eastern Europe used to be a desert. But now there's a strong Polish export office, a strong Hungarian export office. The Balkans, apart from Hungary, with Bulgaria, there's something started, which is great.
As a process.
As a process, sure. But in Serbia, nothing. In Croatia, nothing. Slovenia, something. Greece, absolutely nothing. Turkey, absolutely nothing.
Croatia also has their own by now.
Yes,
Croatia.
they do have.
Croatia, a little, okay. And Romania, I think, has nothing.
Not yet.
No. So, but, you know, it's a bit of a sad state of affairs. And I was thinking, what are the three justifications for a cultural export office? And I can think, for me, there are three. The first is identity. You know, that you are saying we are Croatians. It's image, actually. It's we are Croatians. We are beautiful people. We have a beautiful country. Our music is beautiful. Our culture is beautiful. So it's bound up with all the issues of what a nation is. One is, and then that goes a little bit into nationalism, which is also a justification, whether you like it or not. That we want to be proud of our nation. We want to create a nation if we don't feel we have one, which is obviously a major issue for Ukraine at the moment. And out of, in fact, the war, the Ukrainian Music Association has been able to, you know, massively promote Ukrainian music, which before nobody was very interested in. And the third is trade. Pure trade, which is its business. For some countries, obviously the USA and Britain, exporting music is major business. It's a contributor to the gross national profit, as I call it. So there are these different justifications, and I would say cultural export is obviously a very good thing. It's not expensive, but I have a question. But first, Dávid.
Yeah, because what you mentioned, I think it's a dangerous path, especially in Eastern Europe. And I can only talk by my experiences when we laid the ground for the Hungarian music export, but I wanted to go against any possibilities of nationalism because we already have enough. And on the other hand, my main narrative was based on financials only, that they would spend money on culture anyway because their voter base is going older and older, so they are lacking any connection to younger audiences, and the only thing that they can do is verification. So basically, if they invest into money, then I can ensure that after year one, the revenues through the collecting societies, through the live booking, through the whole infrastructure will be higher than the amount they are willing to invest. And that was the key point, how basically Hobbs was able to start. And I wanted to go against any chances of showing up what Hungary is, because otherwise they would have the ideas that, okay, I have this artist and you should promote them. I have this artist and you should do this. And that was totally something anyone who's involved in export for more than 2 years, they know that these requests are coming from the government level.
But there's a problem, I think. One is when the world of music, let's split it into two, commercial and cultural. And by cultural, I mean that it depends on cultural funding. It depends on the government, the city, somebody or other, the Arts Council, whoever it is giving money. And the cultural funds go to, first of all, classical music, and then somewhere after classical music, maybe jazz, and then somewhere after jazz, maybe in the very, very distant bottom, traditional music of some kind or other. In other words, music that doesn't survive on its own commercially. But we feel collectively, as taxpayers, as people of a certain culture and country, we feel that music should survive. It should be supported. And that's a political decision, in fact.
But if you show them that they also support the diversity, so basically the whole initiative in the case of Hungary was broke down into certain percentages, that at least 25% should go into folklore and regional music, 30%, and basically that was the point when we were able to say that there's no point on pushing mainstream pop music on an export level because each country has their own one, so it's not an international phenomenon for secondary markets like Hungary. So if it's part of the narrative, it can be still defended because these genres are indeed always relying on additional funds, especially in terms of making it interesting for newcomers or fresh artists or younglings who are trying to learn how to play this music. But it's also the part of the education, and that's why I just wanted to step back from in terms of highlighting the national aspect, that it's representing the culture, but also it's mostly investing into making heritage not only a thing in the museum, but to make it a living entity. And that's what we all try to work on.
But there is a commercial, there's more to the commercial argument, I think. There are countries, for example, let's say Finland, who are very successful at exporting their music. Even if the accent is Finnish, and even if the music, there's tons of Finnish hard rock groups and Finnish groups of all kinds and Finnish DJs and all the rest of it, they're very successful at exporting Finnish music, which is not only traditional, also traditional music, but not only. And I guess it's a positive, it's a positive that there are a lot of musicians who are earning money, who are making a living, who are paying taxes, and all the infrastructure around them, and it's created a music industry. And Finland is a small country on the periphery of Europe, same as Balkans.
Finland is like, in terms of the way that country and the nation and the country and the government is treating culture and education, this is the dream for everyone, I believe. And they have something which is really important, something that is probably our biggest problem in our country especially, is that they are putting a lot of efforts to educate people who are culture consumers. So when the child is born there, there is part of the package that the family receives is also free concert tickets. So we talk about totally different world. Our biggest issue in Bulgaria, honestly, is that there was due to political reasons, due to the way, I think that with Hungary we are very close to the political situation, but in Hungary, because of big names, there's some investment in culture as far as I see, because for us to have an investment for something like House of Music is unthinkable that somebody will think. But anyway,
but isn't the
what I'm talking?
But isn't it? We have to lobby our governments. We have to lobby our cultural ministers and show them. Look, this. Sorry to interrupt you, but just not going to Finland, but coming to Hungary. Hungary also has, I think, generally a rich. It supports its music culture at the schools at an educational level quite strongly. No, you don't agree? Maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's not like that. The thing that is different is that as the history of Hungary being part of an empire, and within this empire they have very influential names in history. The composers and they are internationally, their cultural heritage. They have international cultural heritage, especially in the classical music field, and this is their richness But this is something that is done now as part of their nationalism, and because they have names that are going outside the country. With us, we also have this nationalism, but it is based on the folklore, but it's not on the traditional folklore. This is something I wanted to say and to refer back to the case with Brepetrunku. And I'm telling to everybody, because not everybody knows, that the folklore music, because we have in Bulgaria professional folklore music, there are songs that you think they're folklore music, but their original songs sound like this. And there are many people suffering from big trials because they record a song that they think it's traditional because they haven't done their research, and this song actually has an author that has written this song 20 years ago. So all of these people who think that they will take some folklore theme, and Brepetrunku, for example, but Brepetrunku, you can actually steal an arrangement that has a person who has done that. So sorry about this.
The folk music, when it's a living tradition, which it is a living tradition, more or less in most of the Balkans and many other countries, of course there's a huge blurring, and it's natural. There's a blurring between music which is anonymous, nobody knows who wrote it, where it came from, because it happened hundreds of years ago and nobody wrote down the person, or that somebody wrote it, but they wrote it in the tradition, and it becomes part of the tradition. And maybe a banal example would be Bella Ciao in Italy. It's like a folk music, but it actually was written by somebody who not so long ago even. And in Britain, there's tons of folk musicians who are writing songs. and mixing writing songs with performing songs which are traditional and don't have a known author. And that's part of what makes it alive. That's part of the beauty of it, I think, that those, you know, and I think one of the things which maybe is a key point is the folk tradition, or the traditional music, let's say, it's not that everybody does the same thing. It's not that the tradition is a kind of box and you have to do that. It's actually alive. And it's the same with brass bands. If you go to see Boban Markovic or Jambo Agusheva, then they are not doing the same thing. They are in the same tradition, but they're not doing the same thing. They each have their own strong personalities. Otherwise, they would be directly, you know, competing for the same gigs. And so that's, I think, that's good. No? It's a great thing. Maybe it's a chance if somebody has a question also to shout it out. We can't see you at all. We don't even know if anybody's there. But if there is somebody there who has a question, and don't just stick your hand up because really we can't see you, unless, I don't know, I don't think any of us can see you, so you have to say something. Otherwise we carry on.
But if
we
not,
can carry on if they don't.
Otherwise we carry on.
But
if you agree, I would like to come back 5 minutes ago.
Please.
With the grant and the support, financial support. We were talking about that. It's an important topic also on my point of view. You were talking about your region and your country, but also in Brussels, Belgium. I have to knock a lot of different doors to get the money to organize the festival. And when I knock the door of, for example, a cultural center like Romanian cultural center or Turkish cultural center, normally they are linked to the embassy. Okay. Then to the ministry. Even Serbian is the same. Which means that I could not propose, you know, sometimes I'm just looking, for example, to get money for the flight, transportation, accommodation, not the fees, never, obviously, but to get a little support for us, everybody. But you can see that you could perhaps get the money if you follow the cultural rules of the country. I mean, even more in Turkey. You are in Turkey, you know the difference between Istanbul, who are pro-European, with a pro-European mayor, and Erdogan, and the country itself. Then if I knock the door of Yunus Emre Cultural Center in Belgium, Turkish Cultural Center, I cannot talk about a band from Istanbul. You know, it's become difficult to get the money.
Those are national political questions which are bound up with
because
they're part of our reality.
I mean, Balkan Trafik exists thanks to grants, the ticketing obviously, grants, you know, sponsoring, but also money from the country itself.
But we don't have the power to change our, you know, the only people who can change the Turkish government are the Turkish voters, nobody else. We have, I completely disagree with the politics of the Turkish Ministry of Culture. If they want to have a discussion with me about my ideas, I'm very open, but they are not interested at all, of course.
No, but I mean, it's important because if the artists from, I don't know, if artists from Serbia are against the political situation, they will not get a grant.
That's the reality, and it's the same if you are a Kurdish musician from Turkey, you probably everywhere. Will not get supported by the you know.
Then that's why it's not easy to bring Balkan artists also in EU, because sometimes you cannot get the grant that you can get for a French guy. But you know what I mean?
That's the reality of work. That's a choice. We work with Balkan music. But you have to deal with that.
Balkan musician against the Balkan brand. It's because sometimes it's obviously less expensive to welcome a Balkan band, a French band playing Balkan music in your festival, than to invite a Balkan band from the Balkan.
Sure.
You know?
Of course.
That's the topic of the, that's why it's a
But that's also reality. I mean, the only way that reality changes is if there's more cultural funding, because, you know, from an audience point of view, they don't really care if the band is actually from France or Alten Gun is from the Netherlands. They don't care. They just care about...
But it was also part of Alten Gun storytelling that they are also some sort of refugees who are just bringing it over. So I think rebellion is also part of the whole region itself. And if someone is just not adapting to it, it wouldn't have any relevant follower base, because it has to be part of the storytelling, because we have, it's a stormy region, we always have our fights, but it also has to be represented in music as well. So I clearly remember the first time I booked outing, and I used to be a promoter back then, that it was also part of the promotional storytelling aspect, that they are also against something. So it was also a statement. And I think the majority of the acts from the region are also having their own statements as how they identify themselves, or what they are identifying themselves
I'm not
against.
Sure.
Yeah, but
I think a lot of music, and it's not a criticism, a lot of musicians are apolitical. They don't have an opinion, or they don't want to express it if they do have it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I like to work with people who have strong political opinions of a certain kind. You know, it's okay if they don't. If the music is good, that's just fine. I want to, just talking about the word promotion, I have, as an agent, an artist agent, also working with Balkan artists, including Goran Bregovic, I think one of the things that I noticed that I feel is a little bit a kind of elephant in the room about, it's not, cultural funding is great, and I think cultural offices are great, but actually for me, the biggest hindrance to a success of a new artist is the record company, or the lack of record companies. And this means international record companies, and the lack of international PR. If you don't have international PR for your artist, playing WOMEX is not enough. Playing Waves Vienna is not enough. Playing here is not enough. It stays here in this community, but it doesn't reach a wider audience. It doesn't reach the potential ticket buyer. Whether it's a cultural event or a commercial event, there still has to be people buying the ticket.
To promote. That's why a festival is important also for the band from the Balkan, just to spread the information, to be also a type of PR.
Right, but it's not a criticism of record companies, because of course it's very difficult to be a record company in 2023. I got the year right. Or to be an independent record company. And of course for the major record companies, spending money on signing up young artists from the Balkans, why would they do that? What would be on earth the point? There's no point, unless it's very, very commercial music with a huge potential. But for niche music, there is no interest from the major labels, so then it's down to the independents. The independents are all struggling to survive. There's a huge number of offerings every year. You see it at WOMEX. There's more than 30 new artists every year, together with all the ones from the previous years, and all the artists who don't get chosen for WOMEX, or Jazz Ahead, or whatever it is. And so, is there something that can be done there? This is my question, because I feel that's actually a key which would open a lot of doors for artists if there were more record companies who are able to operate at a European level, let's say.
I also wanted to add this point when you told about that you would like to have more fusion acts, because from my response to that particular question would have been that I would like to see a far broader infrastructure, including not exactly by record labels, but also in the terms of just planning front catalog releases, having the PR proactively on this, and not only relying on basically the DSPs like Spotify, Apple, and such, because the majority of them are unfortunately not proactively present on those territories where they should have some sort of a local verification. Because, for example, for Hungary, for Romania, at least there's playlist curation, so the local verification can start, it can build up local acts, but it's still hard, especially for a folklore act from Serbia to show the real value behind their songs if there are 200 monthly listeners, and it's not their fault. Especially that in terms of algorithms, I'm sure you also read a lot about, for example, discovery mode, basically the placement on Spotify radio that try to introduce you new songs. There are certain criteria to be there, and it's super visible that either folklore or world music is highly needed. So more than 1,000% uplift is visible on the tracks that are added by the algorithm. So the people would like to have some sort of a guidance or a narration or if I like this artist, what should I listen to? But on the other hand, without these local verification or without the help of either smaller managements or labels, it can, I always 100% behind those acts who would like to still independent against all odds, because it's also awesome. And I'm doing this for, I don't know, 20 years. But on the other hand, sometimes you really need the label, not because it's a label, but because of their expertise. And if they can be the part of something bigger as part of the roster, it also gives the verification that, just trust me, even if this artist is not there as my top seller, I believe in them, so I verified their future actions. Dot. Sorry.
Okay, may I also say something? Because I will probably sound too rough, but it's a common issue. I believe it's a European issue, as we live in Europe, and Europe is a continent where tradition is the countries, governments, and European institutions to support culture. And we got pretty lazy on that. I'm sorry, but what we miss in the Balkans, it's the different, because the difference is that in the Western Europe, there are traditions when it comes to business in music. With us, the way that culture is treated and funded made us lazy. And of course, money will never be enough if you count on public funding, European funding, public funding and stuff. I think that it's a common issue within Europe and within the European programs and funds, is that I think that this approach is totally mistaken, and it starts actually going in circles.
Which approach is mistaken?
The programs, the way they fund projects, the projects that are funded, the principles on the funding. It's like there are no projects in our region. There are no programs that fund, for example, startups in music. Even these startups are record companies or festivals or whatever it is. So you get a funding and a business plan for 5 years, and if you don't make it, that means that you don't know how to make it. But this to wait constantly and to build your business model on a public funding idea, that you will always get a public funding for that, and then we'll sell tickets on top and you will make profit out of this, is totally mistaken. For me, it actually, we are moving in circles. And yes, we don't have music industry actually developed within the Balkans because we don't have businesses, because our countries doesn't have the idea that the way they support, for example, technological work, because our technological businesses in technology and development are very advanced, and we have world top companies in our countries.
If I imagine
think that it's totally wrong, this idea that we can build our business model on based on public funding.
But okay, just imagine I'm in Brussels and I've suddenly been appointed into the body that decides cultural funding in Brussels. I'm very keen on supporting local initiatives, local record companies, local managements, local structures, infrastructure, whatever it is. How do I spend my money? That's the question. Because for me, you can do what is really interesting, and it's the same for business. I'm an independent business person, so when I'm spending money, I don't think of it as funding. I think of it as investment. I'm always investing. I get some investments wrong, I get some right. And when they're right, I make a profit. When they're wrong, I make a loss. And if I stay in business, it's because I make more profit than loss. It's very simple, and I think it's the same for you, Nicolas. So that's very brutal, but if I feel, okay, it would be really nice to invest in a record company, then I have two questions. First of all, is it a stupid fantasy that it's absolutely impossible to invest in a record company and grow a record company based in Istanbul, which would be internationally, gain an international profile? The answer has to be, of course it's possible. Glitterbeat is based in Ljubljana. So if Glitterbeat in Ljubljana can become a huge player on the independent scene, my record label in Istanbul or in Sofia or in Budapest can also become a huge player. There's no impediment, in fact. So then the question becomes, how do I make the investment? Which part of my life am I going to give to realizing that investment? And I think that would be also my question if I was in Brussels. I would be going, okay, I'm spending public money, somebody's taxpayers' money, and I have to spend it well. And I want the money to be, the most perfect way of spending money is that it grows. You invest 10,000 euros, and in 5 years' time, it's 100,000 euros, and it's created jobs, and it's self-sustaining. So how do I do that?
Back catalog purchasing, unfortunately.
What?
Purchasing back catalog. That's the thing what we also see in the region, especially in Albania and Kosovo nowadays, that third parties are entering the market, paying out huge advances or even just one-time payoffs, and they are just making up for the infrastructure on basically purchasing songs for a lifetime, and then once they will just recoup it, then they will invest into another tracks, which is also a quite aggressive form, and I don't think it will last for long, honestly. So it can help in some cases, but as we also talked about the case of Bre Petrunco, if one track fails and it turns out that it's not an original recording, then it's also a loss.
This was not Glitterbeat's model.
For sure not.
I choose Glitterbeat as an example because I know them very well. So
yeah,
and it's also kind of relevant because they're in the Balkans and they have Balkan music on the label. So it's quite relevant, and they're fantastically good at PR. So you know, how does one emulate that? We see that the model can work, and it's really good for the artists that are signed to Glitterbeat. But obviously, Glitterbeat can't sign all the good artists. There are, you know, 5 people working at Glitterbeat. So there has to be other labels, other Glitterbeats, different versions, different visions of Glitterbeat with different musics. But there aren't, or I don't see them, and that for me is part of what Nicolas's problem is. You know, I feel that there's something missing in the infrastructure. And maybe that's what you were saying also, that somehow the investments in the infrastructure are not focused in the good way, in the best way.
Yes, it's what I see is that we don't have any forms of investing and supporting startups the way we support startups in any other business. I'm giving you a local example because I'm almost sure that it's valid for most of the Balkan countries. We have these schemes and instruments of support of new startups and industries that are under, for example, they're under our Ministry of Economy. They are European programs for supporting the innovation, and yeah, you can get support to become international. It's not kind of that you only count on it, just to support to do it. All the companies that are registered in our country, we have a special activity code. Half of the businesses in our, like all the live music businesses, for example, or the festival, everything which is dealing with performing arts, this code of economic activity, we call it, it's not acceptable. If you have a company which is registered under this code, or your activities are under this code, you are not acceptable to apply like every other business apply. So it is just a small example, but I think it's what we have come to a situation that we need kind of I believe personally, kind of a classification, like if you are an industry or a business, or if you're a cultural organization, that the goals of the cultural organization is not making money, is development of the culture itself, or more non-commercial genres. So some kind of classification and different methods, because we are staying only in the idea that we support culture because of the cultural growth itself, not because of the business.
For me, the key,
to close this, and we have come to a situation that a lot of people and businesses actually go under cover of idealistic goals. They actually have business goals, pure business goals, but they cover them with these ideal goals for the development of culture so they can get the public funding. And I think that we lack a whole scheme of supporting businesses and startups, so the way we support startups in every other business. This is something that we have as a very big local problem, and we don't talk about business in culture. We talk about only cultural and spiritual growth.
I think the business is obviously terribly important. I run a business. Glitterbeat is a business. They make money. They pay their wages. They don't get any cultural funding, as far as I know. Maybe they get cultural funding sometimes for one recording project, but basically the label is private and it pays for itself. That's the business model. Total, the fact that they make great music is incidental in a business, in the sense that they are capitalists. They are making money, and and that's what. That we should be encouraging that. We should be encouraging people to start a business, to start a record label, for example, or which might be online only. It doesn't have to be physical anymore. It doesn't matter. What's important is the marketing. What's important is the credibility, the profile, is the international networking. If you just stay in your country, okay, you might do, if your country has a big enough market, like Turkey, you can make a living just selling Turkish music to Turks. But it won't go anywhere internationally, except maybe diaspora. So if we're talking about the point of this panel, which is the international marketing of music, of local music, of whatever kind, then there needs to be an international infrastructure of some, and I think that starts really with individual businesses, small businesses, which can grow and succeed. Some will fail. But that's of course given if you are investing cultural money in startups, some of them will not work. Not everyone will work, but that's okay. You factor that in. Do we have any questions? Because we are near the end.
Yes, our auto cue, we're gonna stop.
I don't know what's going to happen when this. I hate to think. I don't even know what it's telling us. It doesn't matter. So, any questions?
Or opinions?
Please.
So the question is for Slavina. Yes. So my question is for both for David and for Mila, because David mentioned India in one of his. I'm from India and I run a Rajasthani roots music festival. This is also international, and a lot of the things that Mila was talking about in the context of the Balkans is very akin to what is in India. So I'm just curious to understand. If you don't have the processes that you're talking about for funding these cultural startups or organizations or artists or bands, what is your recommendation? Because in our country, our government is not even interested in that.
What I'm doing, because this is a big issue I'm working on, and so being part of a sector organization that represents interests and the things what I'm doing in the moment. I'll give you what I think that it is working, because I think that it started to reshape the thing because it is a matter of national politics. You need to talk with the people who has to make these decisions. And they don't understand anything about it. And I started for the first time, I see in the history, most of the people in culture talk about there is no money. For us, we are starving, there is no money, we need more money to fund the culture. And it's not only me, it's like a very small circle of people that we think have this common thinking. What we started to do, and what my personal example is, what the conversations I have, is that I start to talk with the politicians and the decision makers about money. I'm giving them examples, like when we talk about, let's talk about business, because when you think about the way they treat culture is like they give money for charity. This is it. They don't see the money in it. They don't see the economical return when you invest in this. And I'm giving them examples of researches that I have, of documents that I have, and I see that they started changing the way they look. Like when I give example with a very huge festival, or like Glastonbury, for example, something that I have some information and economical researches. And you talk about what is the investment from the side of the country, or the public investment, and what is the return. And I said, are we talking about culture now, or we are talking about money? And they started to look different, to see that they actually start thinking, because money always talks to them. Culture probably doesn't talk to them, but they really start thinking about it. And I see that, of course, you need to have the people who are open to listen to you. They get, it is something that you never know, but now we are in a lucky situation that there are people now in the, on the top of our country and the decision makers that are open to listen to you. And the only thing you should do is to talk simple and talk money. So they can understand. I'm absolutely honest.
There are different levels of cultural structures, of course. There's two main levels. One is the national and one is the municipal. And they can be very different. In Hungary, obviously, they're extremely different. You know, Budapest is opposition, national government is the national government, and so on and so on. So you can have a cultural discussion with your municipality, which you can't have with the Ministry of Culture, depending on where you live.
It is something that is the end of, sorry to interrupt, but it is very important and essential thing. And we stopped talking with the cultural institutions. We started talking with the economics, with the tourism, with the foreign affairs, and when it comes to municipalities, we talk with mayors, again with the people who are actually not from the culture. We stopped talking with the culture and we started talking with the people who know money.
I can just to give you an example of Istanbul, or in Turkey actually. In Turkey, if I talk to the Ministry of Culture, which I kind of do, they only have one question for me. Can you get Coldplay? That's it. That's the only question. Nothing else is of interest. Yeah, I just want to say that the second thing I can do is not talk to the Ministry of Culture, but talk to Istanbul municipality. And there we have a dialogue. There we can talk to them. They have a cultural money. They have cultural policy. I think it's not so wonderful, but they are thinking about it. They are organizing events. They are spending public money. So there's a dialogue. David.
Yeah, and what I can just also add, because my past was also aligned with music export, but I became the head of label relations for the region. So the reason when I mentioned India was strictly about metadata. I hope you didn't get it offended or something. It was mostly because I think you also know that India is quite important in terms of Beli's visibility, but on the other hand, whenever we have any algorithmic solutions or those additions, I also just try to find some sort of a pattern, because whenever I try to serve or labels from the region, I'm trying to gain similarities, and I'm just trying to clean up these, how can I say it politely? I can't. So, no, the only thing I would be offensive against is mostly Spotify and Apple, so nothing else. Because in these occasions, when people can talk about, for example, Latin music or Indian music, it can be, in my opinion, as much stereotypical, especially because I also serve labels from this region who are working directly for the Indian market. So I'm always helping them on a weekly basis to clean musical sheets and stuff to let them be used as samples in tracks. And that's their main source of revenue. So it's also something that's working. And as I'm really glad that during this discussion we also mentioned this lack of infrastructure in terms of the classical management of classical record label actions, because this verification in the majority of the time should start locally, and then it can have an international expansion in the majority of the times. And what the artists from the Balkans are suffering is basically this lack of verification from the stores, while they can see that there are some timeless artists who already reach out international audiences. So basically the starting line is totally different for newcomers at the moment, even if some algorithmic tools can help. Can you please repeat again the questions part, because I also started to think about what you will respond to. So.
Any more questions? Any more questions? Because I think we have to finish. I'm not sure. Is there?
Yep.
We should finish now.
There's a mic here. Can you guys? Sorry, I'm over here, but I don't know if you guys can see. Could you define fake Balkan? And second part, is it constructive or destructive to the music culture of the Balkans as a whole? And can you give an example of a project, a band that is fake Balkan that has been either constructive or destructive to the culture?
Yeah, go on.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm not connected to them in any way.
And it's not fair. I mean, fake Balkan, I think, is a provocation, and it's okay as a provocation, but it is a provocation, so I wouldn't take it too seriously, because the problem is not Chantel or the band you just spoke about, or Alten Gun, or whoever it is. They are not the problem. The problem is that the talent from the region, the Balkan talent, is not. How do we export that? How do we market it? How do we find new artists? How do they reach a bigger audience outside the Balkans? And there's a big question which we didn't touch on, which is, does the music in the Balkans travel within the Balkans? In other words, are Bulgarians interested in what's happening in Romania or Turkey or Greece? And I think the answer is generally no. So how do you start with the premise that we should be exporting Balkan music when even in the Balkans people are not listening to Balkan music from other countries? For me, the classic example is Istanbul. I would love to be promoting bands from Bulgaria or Greece or Serbia. With very few exceptions, it's impossible because nobody would come. And I don't have the power or the time or enough clones to deal with it. I can only respond to the market. You know, I can bring something, I can invest money, but if then nobody comes, what on earth was the point? And there's no diaspora in, this is one interesting point. There is now a huge Russian diaspora in Istanbul. Until the war started, there was almost no Russian diaspora in Istanbul. So now, lots and lots of Russian bands, hopefully the ones against the war, have been coming and playing in Istanbul. They play to Russians. They do not play to Turks. No Turks go to those concerts. They only play to Russians, even if they are great Russian bands, and there are some. So even with the diaspora, you have a problem, which is how do you get out of the diaspora and reach a wider audience? It's not automatic.
For me, fake Balkan is, for example, I'm back to the question, because there is a lot of fake Balkan band. There is a lot of fake Balkan band, even in Belgium. Okay, we talk about a very good band. Now they are in Romania. They were in Balkan Trafik last year, and I try to promote them because they are amazing. That type of fusion. They do it very well, and they are inventive also. But the fake Balkan for me is the guy just finishing their philharmonic studying and trying to play Balkan clarinet, for example. I mean, talking about Belgian guy. And that's really, and there is a lot of little events like that in Belgium, but they are really not well known, and it's not so important. But for me, that's fake Balkan. It's people thinking just, I will take the clarinet, I will play few notes of Balkan music, and I will become a Balkan band. That's fake Balkan, basically. But they are really like more amateur.
But it's not a problem, is it? I mean, there are always bands. There are always bands who just imitate, who just copy, who do nothing original, but that's not the problem.
No, it's not a problem. No, it's really not a problem, no.
In my definition, as an addition to everything that has been said, I would also add that fake Balkans could be also aligned with some sort of a motivation when you would only like to basically capitalize diaspora. So even if you're not part of them, you're not relying on them, but you want to have their money. So for example, Australia has a quite visible Serbian community, and we also hear it back from labels and from our Serbian partners that there are some Australian kind of parties or bands who just want to make money out of the diaspora while they are not relying on them, neither on cultural part nor the tradition. And in the wider scale, what we talked about during this conversation, I think it can be also on the verge between what's cultural and what could be up for profit. And in these terms, although fake is not a negative addition in all the cases, but in the majority of the cases when it's about money, and I think it can be used negatively in this occasion because they are taking the spot from something more deeply rooted to one community.
But it's still not a problem because it's not actually the main issue. The main issue is not to do. It's not that the fake Balkans so-called are stealing the work from the real thing. It doesn't work like that. The problem is that there are not enough people interested in the real thing. That's the issue we're talking about, I think.
I wanted to refer to this to answer what for me is a fake Balkan. It's more or less, it's like that the perception of what Balkan is from outside Balkans is not exactly that. Of course, we can talk a lot about is it the perception, the truth, or the origin, the truth. But I think that the fake Balkans are it is the perception of a lot of people who are actually not familiar with the Balkans, of what Balkan is and what the Balkan music is. And I believe that it is actually built up a fake Balkan image of the Balkan music. This is what I think, it's fake Balkan. And you were asking about negative, some bands and people who has some negative. What was your question? I'm sorry about the second part of it.
Are fake Balkan bands destructive or constructive? Is it good or bad that they exist? And are there examples of bands?
It's just irrelevant. Yeah. It's really irrelevant. They are not important. They don't confuse the punter. What would be, for example, a situation which would be definitely negative would be if artificial intelligence generates music which they call Balkan, but there's no musicians behind it, and then it becomes actually saleable on digital distribution, and people started listening to music that actually was just generated through artificial intelligence, which is something that may well become a major problem in 10 years' time.
But the stores are already started to make strong moves against artificial
music. Sure, because we all realize that that would be an insane world, but we live in an insane world, so it's entirely possible. I don't think it's, I think what we are trying to grapple with here, and I think that the conversation, the discussion is the answer to the question in a way. We don't have the answers, but we see the issues, and we are trying in our, limited ways to find what can we actually do about it. Of course, talking to cultural bodies, cultural funders, whether it's the Ministry of Culture, the municipality, or the European Union in Brussels, is one thing we can do. They listen or they don't listen. That's up to them. But of course we don't, at least I think most of us don't wait for cultural funding. We also get on with doing other things that we feel we can do. And that includes, for example, founding a magazine called Songlines, which promotes world music and traditional music. It's a business venture, but it's a business venture which is got a very clear cultural focus, but it's still private. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would say the opposite. It's great if it can sustain itself commercially while staying true to its intention, to its vision. Any other questions? Speak up a bit.
There are fewer and fewer people who would like to keep the tradition, and because it's not popular and it is a very big issue we are dealing with, that's from one side. Of course, younger generation, they are much more globally thinking. They have grew up having the access to all the information in the world. But I really think that little by little there are younger people who, exactly because of their freedom, because we have issues with, when you go, we have professional folklore, as I told earlier, and when you go through the education system, you're very narrow-minded, and this is what they teach you, to be narrow-minded. If you want to play folklore music, this is the way it's supposed to be played. And every kind of a fusion is, we call it chaltura. I don't know how it is in English, but it's not worth it. And the younger generations are much more, they feel this freedom to do and to make fusion, and I really count on them. But in the moment, we actually have an issue with, giving an example, in our folklore schools, there are 3 professional folklore high schools in the world, as far as I know, and one is in India, am I right? And 2 are in Bulgaria. Professional high school. No, what I'm saying this is that it is an interesting issue, it is a communistic decision with us. But now there are people, there are really empty classes with people who doesn't want to, with ears, there are no pupils that are students that are playing kaval and want to play some kind of instruments, which is dangerous for us because they can extinct this way. But anyway, to answer your question, yes, in the moment we have this issue, but I'm quite an optimist because I see that the younger generation, and even not so, it's not necessary to be educated in our educational system. They are much more open. I'm pretty sure that there will be something that is coming with really like fusion styles, combining different styles with our traditions. But I think it's coming, but I cannot give an example exactly.
And something
excuse me.
also is, yes, sorry.
Sorry, may I add a comment to this? Just as a musician, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. I don't feel that we had enough of this musician perspective, what it's like to be.
It's Luca. Yes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Luca. Yeah. So anyway, being a musician, for instance, in Croatia, in a place where there is no industry whatsoever outside of what is called mainstream or utilitarian music for radio or show, I think there's a big gap between how you can educate yourself on what business in music is like. And I think that to this advantage of what fake Balkan is, like there's a big advantage for people who are centralized in the touring countries, the Europe, the United States, definitely, where the industry actually exists. And I think that having the vision of how to utilize the music from certain areas is much clearer to someone who is present in one of those countries or central parts of the industry. And being in the Balkans and growing up there and making the music by the rule of no industry is very hard in terms of monetizing it and presenting it and probably making music that is good enough to be a headliner, that is not fake and that represents this pure idea of what Balkan music is. And what I see the problem is not only this whole bureaucratic and ministry thing, you know, that we should fund certain activities. We should actually work on getting certain individuals into these centers and helping them understand this broader perspective. Don't get me wrong, but this colonialist perspective, it was always been much broader and much more intelligent, I would say, because getting information and this way of thinking down from the Balkans, from the inside, especially as a musician, where it's hard to get education, it's hard to get experience, it's hard to get anything, any contact actually, and seeing what it's like, and being actually good enough to even hang out with the people from the industry. You know, it's all kind of a very blurry thing for someone who is just making music. So I hope this gives you a little bit
Can I just answer you a little bit? I just give you an example of Slovenia, which obviously is a neighbor of Croatia and a smaller neighbor. There are 3 artists that jump to my mind from Slovenia. One is Laibach, who I used to manage. who don't play traditional music in any sense, but they definitely don't play what you could call commercial music or mainstream music or anything else, and they've had a career which has lasted for 40 years, and they've done very well. Another band is Shirom, who are signed to Glitterbeat. Shirom make totally eccentric music. I mean, absolutely eccentric music that has traditional flavors in it, but it's their own music. They, I think, had the great fortune to be picked up by Glitterbeat, and that's their passport. But it also depends on them, because it's not enough to be signed to Glitterbeat. You have to also then make good music and go and play, and etc., etc. And the third example is a kind of opposite, which is a new band called Joker Out, who I think are from Ljubljana, who are a pop band, and who are suddenly playing to young girls all over Europe at sold-out shows. And they are totally mainstream, absolutely mainstream, nothing traditional whatsoever, but they're from Ljubljana. And they are a breakout band, and the fact that they're from Slovenia, nobody seems to care. It's irrelevant. It's not a plus, it's not a minus. So I think that it's not so, and I think probably all three of these bands are self-taught. They didn't go to music school, as far as I know. So Laibach definitely didn't go to music school, and they somehow found their own way. And of course, this conference and other conferences like it, of course, there is MENT in Ljubljana, many conferences all over the world are forums where musicians and people in the industry, like us, meet and exchange and inform and, speed meetings and all the rest of it. So I think that it's not so bad. And being in Croatia, you could say, is the Balkans. It's also Central Europe. It's both at the same time. It's not a geographically disadvantaged place. You could say that Bulgaria has more problems geographically because you have to go further to get anywhere, so to speak, and Istanbul even more. So I feel one can turn these things to one's own advantage. One can say, okay, I'm from Croatia. What can I do? How do I be different? What is my inspiration? What do I want to do? Do I want to be do I want to be mainstream? Do I want to be alternative? Do I want to be experimental? Etc. And just about folk music, I think this came up. I think it's a very important point. There's a living folk tradition in Britain, and there's also a living folk tradition in Canada, in the US, and in many, many other countries, obviously India, and so on and so on. And it's very functioning. It functions. There are lots of musicians who are making a living playing music which is rooted in tradition. In France, is full of folk, there's full of music which is French, decidedly French. It doesn't export very well, but it absolutely works and is good and exciting. So I feel that there are problems which are very local problems. I can feel it in Turkey, where there's almost no support or interest in traditional music, despite the fact the country is so rich in traditional music. And that's tragic. And of course, that requires a local response, a local answer, which comes back to a bit the question about how the cultural organizations support or not.
I just want to say that I believe that this red sign in Hungarian
yes.
means that we have to be over and to wrap it up, because we are entering in our colleagues' time, I guess.
Final words, please.
But it's actually an endless, it can be an endless discussion.
Yes, so I thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas.
For
thank you, Mila.
our
thank
panel,
you, Dávid.
and also
thank
for
you.
our participants. Hi, I'm Clary. I'm the organizer of the conference program. Also, I'm behind of the MOS project. Some useful info for you for the rest of the day. So now we have a lunch break until 2:30, and afterwards the conference program continues. And we are really happy that this discussion sparked some new questions in you. So actually there will be a kafana session in the cafe area from 2:30, where the same topic will be discussed in a less formal way, so you can get your say at that discussion. So please join us. That will be at 2:30. There will be a listening session at 2:30 in this room. And later on at 4, a pitching session where you can hear about very exciting new projects going on. So that's all about the conference program today. And the first showcase begins at 5:30 at the Photon stage. Do not miss that, the concert of Peria. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.